everyone, and welcome to another episode of Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast. My name is Julian Guderley, and this is Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast, where you get to hear the stories and insights from entrepreneurs, social change makers, and artists, displaying how each and everyone's uniqueness makes this planet worth living on. For more, check out greenplanet-blueplanet.com. And today with us is Marc Angelo Coppola, social change maker, a person with a big impact on the planet, philanthropreneur. Marc, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Tell us briefly about yourself, Marc. Like, how would you describe yourself to the world?
I think the number one thing that I've noticed is that in the world around me, there were so many people that were focusing on the problem and kind of shedding light on the different challenges that our world is facing, and very few were kind of working at the actual solutions. And so I'd like to say that I'm a philanthropreneur, which means the combination between taking on the world's biggest challenges through the lens of philanthropy, but also understanding that the ROI of return on investment is just as important as the ROI of ripple of impact. And so kind of having an impact and going out there and having philanthropic causes is super important, but the number one way that we can actually take on the world's biggest challenges is by also adopting an entrepreneurial mindset and kind of focusing on the solutions, which is kind of the skill set that I think entrepreneurs have. That's where businesses are made, is building solutions, building and creating value for people in a way that aids their life. And so those are the things that I really feel call me forward.
Yeah, so that's starting it off powerful. I love that. Solution minded. I totally dig that, and know that that's something you truly stand for as well. Let's kick it off with this, Marc. How do you get in the zone, and how do you enter flow state?
For me, the zone is this elusive, very difficult place to get to in certain moments. And I think, there's no doubt about the fact that I feel that my environment plays a massive role in me being in the right mindset. So if I wake up and I'm in a space where there's a bunch of people running around and everyone's asking me questions and people are coming in and out, and there's always somebody offering me coffee or, wanting to go out to lunch with me or whatever it is, those are environments that, yes, are great, and I thrive in some ways, but my zone is found in the morning. My zone is found through a little bit of a morning routine, and also a trick that I use, which I call power hour. And so I literally have an hourglass. I have no idea how long it actually lasts. I've never cared to time it. But I actually turn around this hourglass, and for the entire time that this hourglass is going, I focus on all my energy going into one task and use that as a tool to move forward. Got it.
Wow, that's a lot of focus. I like that. Tell us a little bit more about your mornings. So you said your flow happens mainly in the morning?
Yeah, so, I like to wake up, like everyone does, of course. And I enjoy waking up. I enjoy kind of spending the first few moments of my day not diving directly into work. And this is, if I'm honest, it's actually a challenge. There's so many times that I want to wake up, look at my phone, look at the time, and it's almost like I'm in this race against myself and my own ambition. And so I wake up and I'm like, oh, it's 7:30 or it's 8 or whatever time it is, and I feel like I have to get to work as soon as I possibly can. And I say work because for me, it's getting to passion, right? What I do, I love. I spend every waking moment of my day working on things that I absolutely am passionate about. And so it becomes this thing that envelops me. But on an ideal day, I would kind of do a little bit of gratitude exercises. I would wake up in the morning, I would journal a little bit. I would do a little bit of stretching, maybe possibly a workout. And I would kind of start to activate my body, activate my mind, to kind of figure out what is my highest priority. What is the number one thing that I want to work on this morning before I get to anything else? And for the most part, because I understand that I'm human and I wake up on a rainy day and I feel just as terrible as anybody else does in certain moments, what I also recognize is that I plan to plan. There's a difference between scheduling and planning. And so every single Sunday or Monday morning, if I'm not feeling up to it on a Sunday, I literally schedule the most important thing that I have from a more kind of global view. And so taking this kind of macro view of what I'm doing and what I'm creating and the impact that I'm having allows me to kind of better navigate the day-to-day routine of what that might look like in my waking reality, in my waking life. So on a day-to-day basis. So instead of trying to figure out what that looks like in any one day or any one moment, I kind of look over that within that week span. And then I also look at the month and the year within that same exercise. So as much as I kind of look at the year, I look at the month, and then I get down to the week and I say, okay, what is my priorities this week? What are the things I absolutely need to do? And try to kind of check off those boxes and make them happen. And that is crucial for my happiness. It's crucial for my efficiency. It's crucial for the number of projects and the number of things that I'm participating in. It gets overwhelming and it gets cloudy otherwise. So my morning zone is really the best. And kind of as the day progresses, as I check my emails, as Facebook Messenger messages roll in, and the world starts asking me for 1,000,001 different things, I feel like I get kind of pulled in 1,000,001 directions, only to kind of restart the cycle again the next morning. So, as the day progresses, I feel like it gets a little bit more hectic, but yeah, so that's why the mornings are sacred for me.
I get it. Yeah, I get it. So here's something really powerful in what you shared there in having your own space in the mornings and kind of tuning in again on that single focus as well. And what I heard was you saying work equals passion. So tell us a little bit more about, like, what are you working towards? What is it that you're creating into this world?
The thing that I'm working towards is building the school I wish I could have gone to, both physically and digitally. I mentioned, that we live in a problems-based society where, there are 80 articles talking about the problem of climate change for every one article that talks about the solution. There's documentaries. I've watched hundreds and hundreds of documentaries at this point. Literally, I watch a documentary a week, every single week for the better part of 7 years. And so building a physical off-grid school, a physical space where people can gather, where ideas can flourish and kind of, kids and adults can come and learn and kind of not let schooling get in the way of their education, well, then that's one of the biggest kind of components or one of the biggest drives that I have on a physical plane. And then on the digital side of things, I understand that not everyone in the world, or not everyone in China or in India or in Australia, can make their way out to Montreal, where I'm from, and visit this physical school. So the question is, how do I bring the school to them? And one of those ways is that I would make multiple physical schools, but the other way is that I would build a digital online space. So my goal is to kind of empower people who are truly dedicated to this kind of life of impact, who are truly dedicated to being better than the person they were the day before, that are truly willing to take the adventure and willing to step into the risks that come with that, and kind of amplify their superpowers and take on the world's biggest challenges just like a superhero would. So I guess that's why I called my online school Superhero Academy. It really is, my answer to the question of what do I want to do when I grow up. It really was what I would say when I was 5 years old, and I don't think, I think the years that I strayed away from that were the lost years, were the years where people's limitations, including my own parents, were being put on me, and that they were kind of limiting what was possible, when in reality, I truly believe we can live the impossible.
I love it. I totally love it, Marc. So Superhero Academy, that's one of the offers you're sharing with the world. What I want to ask you is, what kind of superhero are you?
I guess my superpowers lie on my ability to, I'm kind of like, if I was in the superhero world, I think I'd be Professor X. I love Batman, and Batman is my favorite superhero. I would say James Bond is also up there for me. And the reason for that is because they're regular people taking on massive challenges. They don't actually have any real superpowers, quote unquote, but they believe they do. They believe that it is their duty to step up and play a role within a larger picture. And so I definitely am spoken to in that way. But I think the number one thing that I'm able to create is understanding the powers of others and being able to link those powers to the people who need them. So for years now, I've ran a marketing agency, and I knew nothing about marketing. I knew nothing about web design. I knew nothing about graphic design. I knew nothing about videography. And slowly but surely, I started to learn the lingo, the actual methodology. Then what I started to do is kind of create pathways where people would know me for this or would turn to me for the same kind of inspiration or for these kind of outputs. And then I would turn around and hire my best friends. I would hire people who I knew had kind of mastered this game. I knew were going deeper into this space, and I would build teams. You know, I think that the number one thing I'm able to create is community. And so if I'm able to create community through story, and my number one power to assembling these superheroes and kind of getting to know these people's powers is through my own story and through the stories that I'm able to tell, because I feel that there's this overarching feeling that many of us have. There's a zeitgeist going on, and I'm able to kind of see that, speak to that, tap into that, and use stories to kind of bridge the gaps between people that might not have connected before. And so that's where, I see the opportunity of those who invest in the ROI of return on investment and see themselves as entrepreneurs, meeting the people who are like activists and world changers, people who want to take on the world's biggest challenges but have no idea how to do that from a financial perspective. And so bridging that gap and building kind of this superhero school where all of these different talents have a space and a better world be created. So bringing people together under that banner is important. And so what I like to say is that I promote freedom culture, the ability to empower and encourage all individuals to spread their unique gifts to the world. Because I don't think that there's any one superpower or any one skill set that is any more important than the other. The CEO of a company doesn't exist without the person manning the front desk. You know what I mean? Like, you need everyone to play a part for something great to happen. And movements are created not by MLK or Rosa Parks or anybody, any one person. They're created by a movement of people who are kind of getting behind that. And really it's, there's TED Talks that explain how the number one important person in a movement is actually the first follower. It's not even the person who's leading it, right? Obviously, leaders are important. Obviously, we want to kind of all be a leader in our own way, and we all want to kind of feel like we aren't following everyone else in some way, shape, or form. We all believe that we are the black sheep in some way, shape, or form. But the component of kind of herding a bunch of individualized black sheep into a cause is no easy feat, and I think that's done through story, and I think that's done through recognizing the powers of others and allowing them to play together and connect.
Community through story. I love it, Marc. And there's something that it resonates very deliberate in the way you say that. And my next question really wants to explore this. So did you plan on what you're experiencing right now, or how did you get to where you are now?
I can't say that I planned everything, although I'd like to think that I did. No, I mean, obviously, as much as you plan, you have to recognize that the plan goes out the window in certain scenarios, right? Like, just like it happens on the microcosm, like sometimes I plan what I'm going to do on a Tuesday, but something different happens on a Tuesday. Like, there's a bunch of different factors that play into that. So the component of making a plan is important only from the perspective of knowing the direction in which you're going. So, for example, if I wanted to sail between Vancouver or Canada all the way to Australia, Sydney, Australia, the reality is there's 1,000,001 different ways that I can get there, right? There's no one path in which I can take to get there. Now, the plan is setting out and saying, okay, we're going to follow this. We're going to use this boat with this sail in this way. This is our backup motor. This is that, and so on. And we're going to look at the weather. We're going to look at all these things. But the winds and the weathers and the seas have a way of changing those things. So what I plan is my tools. What I plan is that I don't leave the shore without a compass, that I don't leave the shore without a boat, that I don't leave the shore without the different components that I need to get there. And I adjust from I kind of adopt a stoic philosophy, which is I control what I can control. right? I don't focus on what I don't control, which is the weather and the patterns and the seas and other people and the world around me. But what I control is me and my response to it, my reaction, my attitude within all of those different components. So 5 years ago, I wrote a plan. I literally hashed out a plan of where I wanted to be in 5 years' time. And I've pretty much achieved every component of the plan to some degree. One portion of it is building the physical school. I didn't physically build every component of it, but I definitely designed it, and I definitely created the community, and the school is living in the physical, but it doesn't have a building just yet. So didn't reach every goal in the plan, but I'm actually further along down the path of building the online school, which I believe would only come after the physical school happened. And so, and I'm way further down the path. I would say I'm 2.5 years ahead of that curve. So, the plan changes, but my direction doesn't. The values, the feeling that I have, the mission of freedom culture, the mission of building a school I wish I could have gone to, all of those things are planned, and how I carry that out on a day-to-day basis is based on the environment and the world around me, and just reacting to that. And instead of just reacting to the world, actually acting within that. And that's where true wisdom is laid. It's not enough to know something. You have to take that knowledge and put it into action, and that's where it becomes real wisdom. And so I think that I look and I strive to be wise in that way, and I recognize that there are many people who have walked this path before me, and that I should learn from those people via mentorship, via coaching, via being humble enough to recognize that there are blind spots that we all have, including the people listening to this right now.
Including the two people having this interview, of course. I love where you're going with this. I heard something in there. Wisdom equals knowledge put into action. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I feel as much as you're talking about the solution and people that are pointing out the problem, once we put knowledge into action, our plans might fail, but we will certainly act from a wise place. Let's switch it up a little bit, Marc. Would you invest $1 billion into space exploration or cleaning up planet Earth?
My first answer that came to mind was both.
Yeah, of course.
I would take $1 billion, get a loan for $1 billion, and do both. That's a great question. Here's what I would say. I would invest it in Earth. Here's why. If we can find a way to correct the problems that are here on Earth, if we can find a way to deal with climate change, if we can find a way to do all those things here, then that allows us to, let's say, go to Mars, being a multi-planetary species, and trying to curb whether or not we can survive all the different problems and challenges that humanity faces, both self-imposed and external, right? Like a giant asteroid coming our way, let's say. I really believe that the difficulty of what it would take to go to Mars at this very moment is far outweighing the difficulty it would take for us to solve the world's biggest challenges. In a few days worth of military spending worldwide, if you took all the military spending that people were spending worldwide, I think it was like 4 days or something, or $30 billion essentially, would literally solve world hunger for an entire year. $30 billion would literally solve the world's water problems and access to water for the entire planet. That's not a lot of money. It sounds like a lot of money to you and me, but to if you think about how much the U.S. government spends or how much the world spends just on military, it's only the equivalent of 4 days worth of military budget. So 4 days, you remove 4 days worth of military spending, and you solve the world's biggest challenges. I think the world acts quite differently if everyone has food on their table and water and has access to shelter. I think we'd stop polluting the world in the same way we do now. The reason we are all running to grab more is because we created this competitive mindset where capitalism is about competition. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that capitalism is the problem. I believe that fractional reserve banking is the problem, for example. And I won't go too far into that, but what I'll say is that there's more debt than there is money. And that's mathematical fallacy. But that mathematical fallacy creates a game of musical chairs where somebody has to lose. Somebody is left with holding the debt in their hands and saying, there's no money for me. And so that mathematical human-created problem created a game of scarcity, and that game of scarcity created competition. So I truly believe that the only thing we need to do to change the entire world is to change the fractional reserve banking mindset. We have to change the game from a game of scarcity and a zero-sum game to a game of abundance and kind of perpetual growth in a different way. In a different way that isn't just about interest and growing money so that companies can grow for no purpose, that they can grow in other ways, that we can measure different metrics of success that aren't just ROI, return on investment, right, and dollars and cents, but that are measured in other things like the ripple of impact, right? The fact that, we talk about carbon taxes and ideas of what it would take to curb climate, and we talk about making a cost to climate. And the only reason we do that is we have to create a cost to carbon or cost of environmental pollution is because the only metric that at the end of the day can kind of allow anybody of us to thrive is that metric. So unless we change that metric to now include these other things and we change the fundamental mathematical principles, so I don't think that is impossible whatsoever. And I really believe that if I took $1 million or $1 billion instead of trying to put it in any one technology, any one idea, I would start a $1 billion story. And I would tell the $1 billion story of how fractional reserve banking is ruining our world. And I don't think it would take me $1 billion to make it reach every single person on the planet. I believe that we can make that shift quite easily. The only reason we haven't is because, for the most part, the rich people, quote unquote, don't want that to change in a way, right? The people who are controlling the banks, the people who are at the top in that structure, have made it and won this portion of the game or this version of the game, so they don't really want that to change. And I really believe that we need a conscious thought revolution. We need people to actually step up and demand that change, create that change, have that revolution. And I don't think, and that's why I say story, because the story would create that revolution in the exact same way that we fought for, equal rights for people of color. I really believe, or equal rights for gay marriage and things like that. One of the fights coming up in the future will be equal rights to income, and we're going to have fights for basic income and ideas like that. We're going to have fights for a different system than fractional reserve banking, and that will become something that is known. And unfortunately, schools don't teach you that, right? I went to school of business, and there was not a single class on how or where money comes from. Everyone is studying business, everyone's studying accounting and finance, and yet if you go up to a finance student today in any university, their average university student, and ask them where money comes from and who creates it and how it's made and what mathematical principles it's based on, they wouldn't know. Yeah. So who the hell plays a game of Monopoly without understanding the rules of Monopoly, right? Like who starts playing any board game without first reading the rules? And you don't have to read them in depth, but you have to understand the basics. You know what I mean? Like, you have to start getting to know what is going on around you. So as I realized that changed my life, and that's what made me angry. That's what made me start watching these documentaries one after the other for years, and for the last 7 years. And that's what made me go out in the middle of a GMO corn and soya field, plant a tree, and declare that I was going to build a school I wish I could have gone to. That's what made me start a movement. That's what made me start Valhalla. And that was single-handedly the smartest thing I ever did. But the second smartest thing I ever did was that I told the story. I pulled out my phone and I took a picture. And so in planting that tree, I made a stance and I made a symbol in it, and it was so out there. I was so willing to be on the fringe of something that it actually created an amazing storyline. And then all the stuff that I've created so far in my life was only possible because I made that storyline and other people joined it. Right? Everything that is Valhalla has nothing to do with me. The only component I have, the only role that I've played is being able to be that Professor X, that connector, the understanding of the different people and their powers and their superpowers, and the storyteller. I was the person who was able to communicate the story to kind of take what we were feeling in the zeitgeist and verbalize it into words. And so all the words that I've said in this recording, these are things that I've said many, many times before. The idea of knowledge, where knowledge meets action becomes wisdom, that's something I've thought about. And so these storylines are what I would invest in if I had $1 billion. I would invest in a giant media story and across multi-platform, multi-stakeholder. I would get a bunch of influencers. I would build massive campaigns in a way
there's a $1 billion plan already. I love that you went from $1 billion question to $1 billion story. And then instantly, let's put it to action. What is really interesting to hear there, Marc, is that you speak about community through story when you talk about how community forms and how to connect with people and influence people. But at the same time, again, it came back right now to community through story in making massive change and shifts and getting people access to story, right? Getting people access to information. Very powerful what you're sharing. I want to know a little bit more about you and understand, how did you grow up and how did that influence where you are today?
Absolutely. So I'm just going to preface before I say how I grew up. That $1 billion plan, by the way, I'm not waiting for it to happen. I'm already doing it. See, I really believe that the number one way to be a billionaire and enact a $1 billion plan is to, number one, try and solve a billion-person problem. And I steal that wisdom from Peter Diamandis in his book Bold. But the truth is that if you want to be a billionaire right now, if you're listening to this, you want to impact billions of people's lives, you want to be a billionaire, you want to literally change the face of the planet, start taking a billion-person problem and tackling it right now. That being said, how did I grow up? I grew up in suburbia. It's a suburban Montreal, 10 minutes away from where I planted that tree, and I'm still living here today. What's crazy is that my parents actually moved out of my childhood home, and now I live in my childhood home alone.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a weird story, but it really is true. And so I'm turning this home now into a lab, and I'm turning it into a space where I can record videos, where I can invite other people, because I wasn't able to build the physical school yet, now it's here. It's actually my house. And I grew up playing and having every single opportunity I could have ever possibly imagined. I grew up with access to the internet. I grew up with tons of toys. I grew up with literally every single thing I've ever wanted given to me in some way, shape, or form. And it's not because my parents were super rich or super anything. I think it's because my parents, at the end of the day, just wanted to enable every form of possibility for me. And there were some that they maybe were blind to themselves. I think the path of entrepreneurship or the path of anything is possible possibly eluded them in some way, shape, or form. But I was led to believe that I was smart, that I was capable, that I just needed to apply myself if I wanted to achieve. And I remember this one defining moment where I realized that my direct effort led to direct happiness and results for other people, and therefore to me, because my happiness is measured in other people, and that's an unfortunate thing, and it's also a fortunate thing. It's difficult for me sometimes because it's hard to be happy on my own without making the people around me happy. But what more is life than experiencing it with other people, I guess. But for me, there was this one moment where I was playing soccer or football, depending on where you're from in the world. But I was playing soccer, and I want to say I was like 4 or 5 years old, and my grandparents came out to my soccer game. This is the first time they were ever watching me play a soccer game. And the whole time before that, I sucked. Like, I didn't care. I was going on the field, and I just wasn't doing anything. And I remember, like, not being, applying myself, and my parents being a little bit disappointed, or just not seeing my effort and not seeing my interest. So they were considering pulling me out, but they really wanted me to play because I'm of Italian heritage. So I did. And in that moment, I scored 2 goals in a game. And I literally, I was never past the ball. I couldn't do anything. And here I was, and I remember this goal. And I remember looking over to the bleachers and seeing my grandparents and their excitement, particularly my grandfather, one of my grandfather's excitement. He was just so proud. He was so happy that I had applied myself, that I had put in this effort. And I think in that moment, as I grew up, one of the most profound things I've ever been told by my parents is that attitude is everything. If I approach anything with the right attitude, then I can move through it. I could choose to be pissed off about everything. I could choose to point a finger at the world, at the banks, at the people who made fractional reserve banking, at the people who polluted our planet, at the people who are poisoning our rivers and streams and oceans, at the people who are causing this havoc at all times. And what I recognize is that that's a poor attitude. What I recognize is that every single time I'm pointing a finger at somebody else, there are 3 pointing back at me. And so I approach life, and I was raised to have a good attitude no matter the situation, and to face that attitude over time. And I think I've faced it through various challenges. I had epilepsy when I was younger. I have all kinds of challenges I face today as an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur now for a decade. So my ability to tackle these problems comes from my belief that I can, and my attitude that I can, and that, you know, I recognize that that Gandhi was just a person. You know what I mean? Like, he's just Barack Obama was just a regular dude. Oprah Winfrey grew up with tons of challenges too. So I can let those challenges define me. I can let them be excuses. I can let them be part of my storyline at every single moment. Or I can choose to tell a better story, to tell the story of the one that I actually want to feel, and that by telling it, I become and actually experience and do feel. And so, I believe that attitude is the crux of everything for me, and it allows me to live the amazing life that I have now, and I have such gratitude for it. And that's not to say that it's perfect. It's not to say that it's better than yours. It's just great for me. You know what I mean? It's just great for who I am and what I love. You know, other people see me and they're like, oh, you're living in your childhood home and you're almost 29 years old. Like, what are you doing? You're a failure. And I'm like, no, I'm like saving money and I'm putting all of this stuff into all this other stuff. Plus, now I live here on my own. You know what I mean? Like, now I found a way to.
That's a pretty cool story from where I'm standing.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Hey, attitude of gratitude. There's so much power in what you say, Marc. That's why I'd love to get a little bit more out of you and see how you resonate with those buzzwords I'm throwing at you. And those are buzzwords in our current society. Mind, body, and spirit. And how do you take care of it? What is it for you? How is your mind, body, spirit balance that people start talking about since a couple of years?
They're vitally important. If I don't invest in my spirit, then my mindset goes off. If I don't invest in my mindset, then my body starts hurting. If I don't invest in my body, my mind hurts. They're all super connected. I'm personally a pro psychedelics. I believe that we have to expand our minds. I believe that it allows us to see pathways and literally create neural pathways that couldn't have existed before, or didn't exist before. It creates connections between different parts of the brain that allow you to see the world in a different way. You know, they're buzzwords for sure, but they're important. They are actually important. There's a reason they're buzzwords. There's a reason why stereotypes become stereotypes is because there's something that played out in the world around us that many people noticed, and whether we found it funny or whether it's a kind of a more of a racist thing or more of this or that. Obviously I don't condone any of those, the negative side of that, but I do see the beauty and the power of being in the right mindset, investing in the right body, investing in myself, and recognizing that we are what we consume, we are what we watch, we are what we do. That's important.
Yeah. Well, if you had an apprentice in your field, Marc, what would you tell them, and try to distill it into 3 lessons? What would you pass on?
Amazing. I actually spoke about this morning, and I do have multiple apprentices that work with me. I also am an apprentice to multiple people as well. So I will preface that. As much as I'm a teacher, I'm also a student. The first lesson I would say is attitude is everything. I mentioned it earlier, but I think that many of the people who want to achieve something get caught up in having it now. They get caught up in the attitude and try and kind of create and replicate something that they see in other people. And they're trying to be somebody that they aren't in some ways, or they're trying to become somebody that they want to be. And so the attitude I took is that there's Marc, which is the kind of the name that most people call me. And then there's Marc Angelo, which is kind of my actual full name, but it's kind of my stage name. It's the person I aspire to become. Right? And so not every day am I perfect. Not every day am I living a sustainable lifestyle. Not every day am I waking up and changing the world. But every day I try to be that person. Every day I wake up and I have that attitude that I can be and I will be, and that I just need to continue to refine and work at those things. So attitude is everything. Lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is I'm inventing it as much as you are. So many people ask for advice from other people, and it's because they feel like they found a secret. And there's no secret to success. There's no fast shortcut to the top of your mountain. What I mean by that is what you want to achieve individually, whatever your listener who's out there wanting to make happen, you can make happen if you recognize that the putting in hard work and that inventing that path actively is exactly how everybody has done it before. Now, is there to say that there are lessons to be learned from those who have walked the path before you? Yes, there are tons of things you should learn from other people. And you really need to kind of find those people and use that as a way to kind of just attract the opportunities and see the obstacles as they come so that you can navigate around them before they smack you like a brick wall. So the idea of I'm inventing it as much as you is the only difference between the apprentice and the teacher is that the teacher has spent more time asking the same questions that the apprentice does, right? That's the only difference. And then the third thing, that I would say is that if you want to be successful in anything in life, right, you have to have a great attitude. You have to kind of invent it as much as find mentors and invent it as much as they are, right? Finding mentorship is important. And then the third lesson is create win-win scenarios. Use your story to connect with people. Use your story and listen to their story to truly understand and genuinely connect with people. And if you want something from them and they want something from you, and you can create a win-win scenario, that's the only thing that will ever move the needle. If you create wins for people, then they're going to create them for you. That lead with your gift. Lead with what you can offer, not what you want. Don't try and take, because you're going to pay full price for everything. You're going to find that it's a zero-sum game. You'll never be rich. But if you focus on giving more than you ever take, then you will start receiving more than you ever possibly could have taken in the first place. You will literally start down this path that is perpetually growing. It's like the true form of abundance is not wanting anything. It's like having zero expectation. It's going out there and saying, I'm giving, and I'm not giving because I only want to have a return. I'm giving because I care to give, because I believe in this person and I listen to their story and they listen to mine, and therefore I want to help them. And so the relationship I even have with you, right, is related to that. It's like related to this feeling where I just showed up and I came into your life and you came into mine, and I wanted to give to the things that you're working on, and you wanted to give to mine, and this is why we continue to maintain this relationship. It's like you're always trying to help me and I'm always trying to help you, and I'm always giving my word that I will do something, and I always meet that. I always do it. So creating the win-win scenario and then following through on it, right? Like, don't just say it, do it, right? It's not enough. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. We're meeting in the win-win, if not the triple win mentality even. You know, the win-win-win is like, I want me to win, I want Marc Angelo to win, and I also want the planet to win.
Exactly.
Because the planet is the collective, is all of humanity, is all of what we currently call our home, right? So,
exactly.
Which leads me to a great question. Usually my last question in the podcast, but I feel like it's just perfect timing to ask you right now. I want to understand, Marc, what's your long-term vision? And let me specify this. If we as humanity had a 200-year vision for planet Earth, what would yours look like?
Whoa, that's a great question. You always have great questions. If I had to have a 200-year vision, where we're going to be in 200 years from now, my general thought is that we would have very different systems when it comes to the systems of motivation, and I say motivation, but like the word is eluding me, but kind of we're driven by money right now. And I think the biggest shift that I would see is that we would be driven by other things, that we would be driven by a multitude of metrics that change that. And I have a vision that education becomes the number one thing that we invest in. That instead of investing the biggest spending that we have is in military, instead of investing in hate, instead of investing in defense, that we proactively invest in the other side of the equation, which in my opinion is education. It's knowledge. And it's knowledge applied, so it's wisdom, right? If we can change the world, I would love to see that we make the wise decisions. And the wise decisions are long-term decisions. In fact, that's my definition of sustainability. When I first got into sustainability, I thought it meant planting trees and solar panels and earthships and all those things, right? But now I recognize that it's just a question of long-term thinking. It's just a question of making a decision today that's going to impact me and the rest of the world in a positive way, that is net positive in that way. And So my vision would be that we would shift from those kind of intentions of trying to get everything for ourselves into a collective state of mind, right? That we recognize that instead of competing, that we can truly collaborate. And I think a lot of us say that, and we're intuitively learning that right now, but I think it's going to take a few generations of storytelling and technology and opportunity to make that shift. But I don't think it's that far away. You know, I like to think that, like, the iPhone only came out 10 years ago. And yet I cannot imagine the world without an iPhone. I really cannot imagine the world without the internet, and that was not that long ago. You know, I can't imagine the world without cars, and that also wasn't that long ago. I mean, if you think of the history of the planet being 4.6 billion years old, give or take, right? And you think the history of the universe is 13 point whatever billion, and you think that there are more planets out there than we could possibly ever count. There are more stars out there than there are grains of sand on all the beaches of the world. I mean, that is insane to think. Fighting over this one territory or this one space or defending one country versus the other is silly. That we can remove labels, right? Like, instead of calling a black man, you call him a man. And instead of calling, to strip away some of these stories and these divisions that we've had, and recognize that humanity is what we are, right? And that we can be, and we could be it together, and that everyone could be accepted in that way. And the only way that we ever go through that is that we teach that, right? There will always be division. I always believe that there will be one tribe and another tribe. There will always be people who believe that the world is round, and there are people who are going to believe that the world is flat. No matter how much science you show people, there are always going to be a counterculture. And that's beautiful, right? Because counterculture in and of itself created opportunity, because we once used to believe the world was flat, and then when somebody created a counterculture that said, well, wait a second, what if it's round? And then all of a sudden we were able to prove that it was round. And now people are trying to prove the opposite. And I think the beauty of that is that people are questioning. I would love to see a world in 200 years where we question some of the fundamental principles that we are experiencing today. And so, yeah, I see a decentralized world. I see crowdsourcing as a number one staple. We're seeing that with, Ubers and Airbnbs, but I think we're going to see that on steroids or in hyperspeed in a way that doesn't even we can't even comprehend in 200 years from now. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's there. Consciousness isn't just, the body that I'm in. And it isn't just this world, and it isn't just this universe. I think it's something that we cannot explain, and that we can recognize that, in a sense, God, quote unquote, or the universe, better termed, the universe is within us, right? That we are that stardust, that we came out of all of these crazy things, and no matter where we're going, it's beautiful. That in a sense, we are already living the world that is perfect. And yes, there are challenges, and there will be challenges in 200 years' time from now too. But somehow we're still here. Somehow this is all perfect. It's all working. Somehow most people get to and from the destinations that they want to go to when they jump into a car. Somehow we've figured out to literally create explosions, mini explosions that we put into an engine, and that car even works in the first place. And so the ability for us to connect and talk where you're on one end of this country and I'm on the other end of this country is insane. So we live in that beautiful world. And if you have a vision for 200 years from now, it's that we can all continuously build the world that we know is possible in our hearts.
Beautiful. I love hearing that. There's so much that got sparked in my head, and yeah, I can absolutely see your vision, Marc Angelo, and I'm very happy you shared it with our audience today. A very deep question, and I'm really wanting people to let it sink in. A couple of short questions to you to kind of wrap up our short hour here. What are you reading right now, and what was the last book before that?
I'm reading about, they're actually both Robert Greene books. One is 33 Strategies of War. That's the one I'm reading right now. And the one before that was 48 Laws of Power. Now, there's some other books that I've listened to in between, but none have captivated me quite as powerfully. I've been pouring into, let's say, Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. Those are books that I'm definitely enjoying. I mean, I looked into Ask Gary Vee, mainly just to support him. I already know what he has to say, to be honest. But the components of the deeper understanding of how the world works and how people's intentions and how they manifest and how they use power and the power dynamics and how that changes what they go after or what they see, and the division that power creates is interesting to me. So I don't read those books because I want to wage war. I read those books because if I'm going to shift the narrative of the war that has been waged upon me and upon most of the world, that I have to understand their tactics, that I have to understand the way that they think and the methodology that they have. But more so than reading, I listen to a lot of documentaries. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of YouTube videos. A friend of mine, his name is Charlie Hooper. He runs a YouTube channel called Charisma on Command. I watch vlogs like Casey Neistat. I absorb an enormous amount, an array of material. So I don't feel that any one book plagues me or hits me too much. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely interested I'm definitely interested in what drives people, what moves people, and their draw to power, because I see it within me, and I see how it can be a dangerous tool, but I also see how it can be a tool for building a movement that changes the world. And so I'm teetering on those two. I think any superpower also has the opportunity of being super destructive. And so it's understanding both those sides of the coin and recognizing that they both live within me that I've used.
Exciting. I second that. It's important to widen your knowledge, right, and understand all kinds of perspectives. A couple of very fast questions: ocean or lake water?
Ocean is definitely way more epic, I think.
Cannabis or alcohol?
Cannabis for sure, though, without a doubt. Yeah.
Poutine or tacos?
I'm from Quebec. I have to go with poutine.
Nice. Cultural pride. Universal basic income, yes or no?
Absolutely. Without a doubt. Inevitable.
Yeah, I think I heard that a couple times there in your sharing your wisdom. Beautiful. Well, Marc, is there anything else you want to share with our audience and you kind of want to send them on their way?
My biggest thing I would say is think about one impossible thing that you would love to see happen in your life. One impossible thing that you can see out there in the world that only people on TV do or only other people who you admire do, and recognize that they are just humans just like you. That you can go out there and achieve that impossible, and the only thing standing in your way between lighting that fire is your focus with your attention. Is to light the first fire and then carry a torch from that first fire to the next one. So dream about the impossible. Figure out that one thing you want to do right now and just focus on it. Put everything into it. Like, forget that whole quote of don't put all your eggs in one basket. Right now, you can put all your eggs in this one basket. You really need to do that if this is something that you're looking to step up and do. If you're not living the life that you want to be, if you're not feeling like you are in any way, shape, or form in the direction or the path that you want to be doing, if you're not sailing from Canada to Australia in a sense, right, and you're not on that path in any way, shape, or form, then you need to radically shift what you're doing. Now, if you're on that path, and you are sailing, then recognize that the one thing that you need to know is that you can control what you could control. Recognize that you can't control the winds. There's no point in being angry about them. You might as well just shift and change your strategy based on the world around you. And I think that's the most empowering thing that I've ever been told and learned. And it changed my life, and hopefully it changes yours.
Wow. Empowering is how this conversation felt with you, Marc Angelo. Thank you so much for being on the show.